what we're saying is, so this is fractal. So we're talking about this shape. It's fractal, like this does over here, like the red demonstration over here. Any of the nodes in the fractal will access the entire array, won't they?
That's the point. That is the point. In fact, remember the X, Y, and Z coordinate of every node in the star mother infinitely is a simple exponent of golden ratio, nothing else.
Right, from the Planck that's at the center.
So that's right. That's right. So they're all spaced by golden ratio to Planck perfectly, so there can be implosion to Planck at the center. Yes. And that's the communion point and the place where you embed in the
So if you're at
the center.
Go ahead.
And noted, it's important to note that the tetracubic array does not produce a center. In other words, the waves do not arrive at the center in a tetracubic array. The charge waves. There is no connection to center
in this
in the tetracube. Well, if these are waves of charge collapsing, the dodecacosa produces perfect collapse to center. The tetracubic produces no collapse to center.
I'm trying to make a quick. The wave comes this way and distributes into these nodes, into here, and then in.
Well, but the best way to visualize that is the 10 spirals of the golden mean on the perfect cone, which goes into every face of that dodecahedron.
So let's see if it pulls the animation. Nope, just one frame of the animation.
Oh, I see. Maybe if it, oh no. Well, in the case of the equation, which proves that this is precisely 3 hydrogen radii, those nodes are the foci of the electron shells, 3 of them predicted to many significant many significant digits by the equation Planck times golden ratio, meaning that the nodes we'd call the electron shell cloud nodes are in fact compression nodes in perfected charge collapse, Planck times golden ratio. What are they made of?
Compressed charge.
Compressed charge.
And that's giving them an electromagnetic distance here by output of voltage.
That's right. And the distances are, well, there is voltage.
Well, electromagnetic output basically is what determines the distances.
But and you know, compression charge is the definition of voltage, actually pressure difference. So yes, it is why electrons exist. Actually, electron shells only nest in tetracube dodecacosa and nothing else for this reason.
Okay, I'm going to put this over here so we can just kind of look at it.
But this is a useful visualization for charge collapse in general, because this is the way you'd visualize how stargates work, and how this is also the way consciousness forms as plasma inside your synapses when you make golden ratio in your
So
brain.
Information travels down and back up. Is that correct?
There's implosive compression. The implication here is that when golden ratio is perfected, there is a slight preponderance of centripetal versus centrifugal charge, and that difference is named the gravity.
I see. So,
well, remember, up until now, physics had no clue why anything is centripetal, therefore doesn't know what consciousness is or gravity.
But it's centripetal because it's actually going into the Planck.
But because it is implosive, the adding and multiplying of phase velocities by perfected golden ratio, perfected heterodyning recursively, is converting a portion of the compression into acceleration of charge towards center. The recursive constructive golden ratio.
So as it gets closer, it's accelerating, and that action is causing gravity. Right. So we talk about.
It's not causing. No, causing is the wrong word. That action is the only definition of gravity. The experience of that acceleration is the only definition gravity ever had.
So I'm giving a little bit of motion there, just showing that. So as it's
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's
As it
nice.
speeds
That's
up,
useful.
so
Yes.
down here
Yes.
it's speeding up.
It should. Yeah, that's right.
And that's giving
Yes.
gravity.
Yes. That is gravity. Gravity is only a name for that acceleration, nothing else. The acceleration of charge is the definition of gravity. There is no other definition.
So, okay, so I can clean this up and add some spirals. I don't know how sexy it'll look, but this really does explain a lot.
But you know what? Actually, yeah, even Tony, even if spirals are too messy at this point, this accomplishes a lot.
Let me grab this.
Is good.
I'm going to grab this. Because it's important to kind of have a representation of what's really happening here.
Yeah, and actually, you'd tip that around so the
you're
facing
you're right.
Or you could, but you could just stack that, put that in the bottom.
It's kind of looking like that. It's kind of more like this.
Yeah, that's right. That's yes.
So on a fractal version,
yes,
that's what's happening. I don't want to leave it there.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
but the idea that the highest possible definition of what fractality is, there is no higher, more perfect definition of fractality than perfected compression. All other definitions of fractality are secondary to successful compression. And this maps the only possible perfected compression in 3D, which is why this is the only possible three-dimensional fractal.
So when you're tuning something, oh, here's your AI voice did that. When you're tuning something, some of your technology, you're aiming for these points.
Okay. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Dan. Great to see you again, buddy.
We always have fun.
We always have fun. And, you know, one of these days I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out and see you in your beautiful neighborhood where you're at.
Hey, we're looking forward to it, man. We'll have fun.
You're at the top of my bucket list to visit. So, so we're working on some stuff on technology, just the little bit that I've grasped as well as I can of hanging out with you and talking about what we're doing has really changed my life and the way I go about things. So that being said, I really want to drag the rest of humanity along with me and bring them on a process of discovering it. Because most people don't think about charge collapse or the quantum field or the universal field or ether. People, we think about the things that they do, the results of these things often, but we don't think about why, because that kind of education is trapped behind the apparatus. You know, you have to go to college, you have to learn this for a long time, you have to dedicate a huge amount of your life to learn these things, and most people have other areas that they're heading in other directions, right? So the knowledge needs to be boiled down and given to people in an easy to digest way, right? So that's why we're here. Perfect. And I think you agree it'll be a big difference. It makes a big difference to people.
Yes, no, that's wonderful. And I would like to say with enthusiasm that perhaps a turning point for you, Tony, was when you realize, you know, we've been talking about these still point nodes in an array, we call them longitudinal, where collapse implosion creates the still point. And the turning point, maybe for Tony, is this right, was when you found out that those still point nodes, like the obelisks, et cetera, were the leverage points for your remote viewing school, among other things. It became practical. True? Yes, maybe.
Absolutely. So when I understood that that was the makeup of the micro universe that fractals into the larger universe as a whole. So for instance, so people can understand, we see hurricanes making the same shape as a galaxy. So that math, and that goes all the way down to the Planck distance, which is a great deal smaller than we can imagine. So the Planck distance is farther away from us. Our size of what we exist in right now in the world, the Planck distance is smaller than it is than we are to the size of the known universe. So.
And that original slideshow we used showed I think it was, I forget the name of the hurricane, making a very clear pentagram in the hurricane. The standing wave, the implosive, centripetal, made the still point. And that's what That's what this whole thing is about, which is actually understanding. If you have a little dowsing, you find that still point, the magnetic cross point called sacred site. It's a longitudinal node. It's a place of leverage compression where telepathy is possible, where remote viewing is possible, where everything is enabled, because that's what DNA is, radio is made of. That's where we're eventually end up with the conversation. And the conversation starts right where Tony's questions are, which is, how does charge collapse make all that happen?
And what does that happen? And those nodes are actually where charge is traveling
And
on its way to collapse down and creating gravity and everything else that we hold dear.
yes,
right? So all of our positive feelings and where we go when we die.
yeah. And until then, we didn't know why anything was centripetal. Therefore, we didn't know the cause of gravity or consciousness. So we need to figure out charge collapse, because at least physics agrees that charge collapse does cause gravity and consciousness. But of course, they don't know what causes charge collapse, and that's why we're here.
Excellent. So for people that are already lost, and I know that I was one of them when I first saw your information and first met you years ago. I was already lost in charge collapse. What is that? So so today we're just going to do a few questions and we'll talk about charge collapse and the Planck distance.
Yes.
So I just want to set this up by saying that the Planck distance is the smallest unit of measurement. Am I saying that right? In the universe. And it's the smallest measurement in the universe.
There's many ways to say that. A nice way to say it is that it is the Planck length and time is the unit of length and time into which every wave that physics has ever measured divides evenly. In other words, it is the pixel of the quantum foam. Or you could say it is literally, exactly, precisely the proven musical key signature of the universe. It's that simple.
So it's the smallest thing that a wave can travel. A wave, once it gets to the Planck, must travel longitudinally.
Well, when the wave implodes to the Planck dimension, the inertia is converted in the vortex from the transverse to the longitudinal compressional, because it's literally the way the squirt gun works. And that's going to lead us to gravity and consciousness.
Okay, so a big definition, and I just want to say another thing, that the Planck is the same everywhere. So time is fluid, so time can move. You can experience time faster and slower. Gravity can move. You can experience areas with greater gravity and less. But the Planck is always the same size everywhere we would go. Is that right?
Well, yes, a billion light years in all directions. It's all the same. In fact, we think it ain't about the Big Bang. It's about agreement on Planck, because that's where the waves are converted and have to be distributed efficiently or they die. So the whole universe happens to have agreed on Planck.
So I also want to say this. So 1 cubic meter, this is very important. And this is another thing that blew my mind. And it really changed the way I think. There are more Plancks in 1 cubic meter than there are cubic meters in the known universe.
Well, it's 1.61 times 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, approximately. So yeah, there's billions and billions of them in a hydrogen atom, as it were. But
in a hydrogen atom.
Yeah, but it is the way the universe is tuned. So it establishes the definition of embeddability and tuning. That's why it's an important concept.
And so that leads to another thing, is that it becomes a fractal. So as waves are larger and go down, they're in a fractal pattern, and that's what they're riding on these nodes.
Yes.
That are a certain shape. So we're taught to hate the pentagram. It's evil, it's bad. But really the universe is made up out of dodecas and
DNA and hydrogen, absolutely.
So the universe is built on the pentagram shape because of voltages. I call them voltages. It's not exactly the right verbiage, but these nodes put out a voltage or a magnetic charge, and they can only fit in a certain distance to the next one. And it works out in a fractal shape.
Yes,
and that's what these waves ride down. That's what electrical waves and other waves ride.
Well, everything is a wave of charge in this language, actually. But and to be clear here, fractality defines perfect compression for sure, and golden ratio defines fractality. So self-embedding, self-similarity, the ability to fall the small to fit inside the big. So we did the math to prove that perfected compression is always defined by perfected wave interference, which is always defined by golden ratio. So golden ratio, which is how Pence nest, defines the fractality that allows the compression. Einstein was right. Non-destructive compression is the solution of the unified field, but he, of course, didn't know what a fractal was and didn't know that golden ratio was the solution of compression.
Fractal is the energy going down by in increments of the golden ratio
Exactly.
to the
Exactly.
next size down, and that fractal goes all the way to the Planck and then ends up out.
Yes.
Okay, so just to get it back to basics, I'm sure that this is mind blowing to anybody that's never heard it. So we covered what is a Planck. What is your definition of charge collapse?
Well, physics has been talking about charge collapse forever because, even Einstein said non-destructive charge collapse was the solution to the unified field, but didn't know what could cause non-destructive charge collapse, which is the question I answered with Planck fire. You take Planck and multiply by simply exact multiples, golden ratio, fractality perfected. So charge collapse means actually, Einstein added one word to that phrase. He said non-destructive charge collapse was the solution to the unified field. And golden ratio is what we discovered and proved by equation. Golden ratio is the solution to non-destructive charge collapse, which means the waves can add and multiply recursively. It's called recursive heterodyning in that nest of pentacles inside each other, pentodeca inside each other. Everybody's seen the star mother. So in that geometry, the adding and multiplying of wavelength and wave velocities is always constructive. There's no destructive interference. So that takes the inertia from the big down to the small without getting hurt. And that means the inertia can pass through center non-destructively, that center being defined as Planck. So, yeah, it's obvious. I mean, it's clear, and that's the subject of our book, Planck Fire, too, that after physics agreed that charge collapse caused gravity and consciousness, physics agrees. This is not new information. What they didn't have a clue what caused charge collapse, and that's what we figured out.
The charge collapse rides along these nodes in increments of the golden ratio and gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right. And we could say,
to me, it sounds like, to me as a tradesman, it sounds like charge dissipation, like it's dissipating.
It's actually more accurately implosion. And in fact, it's interesting. So until our explanation, physics did not know why anything was centripetal. For example, gravity or conscious. We know focused attention causes charge to collapse. It's been measured, Bill Tiller. So now
wait. Focused attention causes what?
Well, in Bill Tiller's, he was a friend, a physicist, one of the most famous, Conscious Acts of Creation is the title of his book. And he showed 11 different ways where you could measure that focused human attention causes charge to collapse, to compress, actually. He measured 11 ways. He didn't have a clue what caused consciousness or charge collapse, but he proved 11 different measurements that consciousness causes charge to collapse. Literally, electric fields become centripetal. So the big mystery, if you want to know why objects fall to the ground, not to mention why consciousness exists, you're going to have to know why something is centripetal. And this answers that question.
So what is consciousness to you then?
Well, so it's very specific here. Obviously, the unified field is simply a pervasive, infinitely compressible medium. It's called a superfluid. And that's charge. That's what the ether is made of. And when that superfluid implodes recursively, literally recursive turning inside out, which happens to be what the definition of the first word of Genesis, the ability to turn inside out, ability to self-refer, defines consciousness for many philosophers. So this recursive turning inside out, when it's perfected by golden ratio, creates the implosion that pulls in more and more harmonics from a distance, basically defining self-awareness. Now that can happen in many different kinds of vortex, the heart of the sun, for example. But in humans, the plasma vortex, which is the synaptic array, starts a vortex inside your head. And when that vortex comes to a point, it literally makes an eyeball. So the kids who learn golden ratio in their brain waves and they can see without their eyes, they say a vortex occurred. I looked down the pinhole and it became an eyeball. And then they start seeing without their eyes. And that explains how you take vision with you when you lucid dream, when you die, when you remote view, when you astral travel, when these medical surgeons were outside their bodies. We're the first to answer the question of how consciousness went outside the body. Consciousness went outside the body because the plasma vortex was still spinning, which tells you something else is you ain't going to do it in an aluminum box. Hell no. There's only certain environments will allow that charge to spin. Life force.
Okay, so consciousness is a big thing and it's a big answer, and that makes a lot of sense. We'll talk
It's a
about
vortex.
that.
It's a plasma vortex of charge that makes an eyeball because of implosion. And you can
everything is charge, and it's a whirlpool in charge.
That's right.
In a universe where everything is a charge,
That's right.
These are whirlpools of charge that can self-refer.
That's right. And they can implode recursively. And then eventually, when the spectra of the recursion becomes broad enough, broad spectral implosion, then they're called self-aware.
I love the term awareness for consciousness. So
Yeah.
we are self-aware or you're not.
Yeah.
And some people are going through life very unaware. So, but that's a different story. That's for another show. Okay. So this is kind of a big question. How do I understand all of this from the top? And just we will unpack that later. I kind of don't want to.
Well,
How do I understand all of this from the top? How would you feel that?
Well, in your personal experience, for example, if you take your rubber sneakers off and suddenly step in living water, you notice your vision gets sharper. It's called grounding. The reason your awareness, your consciousness got sharper was because you enabled that implosion by grounding, which is an electrical access to charge distribution fractality. So you can have many personal experiences after you know what consciousness is, making consciousness better. Like, don't live in aluminum box electrosmog because your consciousness is going to fade. It's very simple. You need to know what consciousness is, or you actually, in the end, lose your soul. That's really the.
You have to maintain it. So it's something to be maintained. It's not
Absolutely.
just given.
It's an effort. It's a job. It's a skill. In fact, every human decision is about charge from Return of the Bird Tribe. And it's simple. The charge is, they call it the quality of grace. So you pick who you're going to kiss or which broccoli to eat, whether you can implode charge from it. And eventually, if you do that enough, you become immortal. You have a soul. You take memory through death. So it's about that hygiene.
That is a beautiful answer. I'm glad I did run with that. Thank you. So, and then 6 seems redundant. Where does this exist in my life?
Yeah, well, it's beautiful.
Charge collapse.
Yeah, we really need to know that charge collapse is the cause of life force. Literally, we measure whether the center of a building is implosive capacitive by the same harmonics, and we predict in advance what building causes a seed or a child to grow. The seed germination is predicted by that measurement, which defines biologic architecture and defines life force in buildings. So after you can define life force as charge collapse, you can put that into practice, man. You can build the ultimate bliss-inducing temple once you understand that, and you can design your life to take memory through death. Very important.
So these are big things. These are big concepts, but it also applies to many other fields, right? So gravity is working on the same way. As a charge collapses along these nodal points in a spiral, that is the increments of the golden ratio, as we have in hurricanes and galaxy spirals. As it's doing that, it's accelerating and pulling on the charge behind it. So that's the force of gravity.
That's right. And which might enable you, unlike every physicist on this planet, to say why objects fall to the ground. But very simple examples of that. The side view of the EM drive, the electromotive drive, is basically microwave making a caduceus. And when that microwave comes to a point and implodes, it squirts out the longitudinal, which defines gravity wave. And this exact same physics defines why Schauberger's repulsine made gravity and defines why a tuned mercury vortex makes gravity. Once you understand that conversion of implosion down that vortex with the squirt gun tuned to Planck at the center, takes that transverse up and down wave and squirts out the longitudinal definition of gravity wave, you then understand how all these gravity devices work and how all 0-point energy devices work.
So that's a lot. So that's a big charge. So I'm still just trying to keep people on in the basics here.
Did we keep it simple? No.
It will be simple never. So we're talking about everything. So the idea is, the reality is, we are talking about literally everything.
Yeah.
Like charge, the universe is made of charge. It's not made of solid objects. It's made of charge. Solid objects are made of charge. Gravity is made out of action of charge. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about all of it. Okay, so how does this help me improve the quality of my life? Could you give an example of how just understanding this could improve the quality of my own life?
Well, yeah, I mean, so many things that are standard for our age, which is absolute electrosmog, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. And these are literally, precisely, exactly destroying life force, consciousness, and soul, because the sharp square wave of Bluetooth, for example, that every kid goes to bed with in their ears every night, absolutely destroys the implosion of that vortex, means they will not lucid dream, they will not have a soul. So yeah, this the quality of everyday life, when you understand what causes life force and bliss and soul, is this electrical implosion. I mean, it means you want to change a few things, like what kind of building you live in, what kind of food you eat, and what kind of magnetic line you live on. Everything to do with hygiene for bliss. Very important. In fact, it's life or death.
Well, so electrical hygiene in your
Absolutely.
environment is very
Absolutely.
important in your life.
Yep.
Well, this brings me into the next question. Can this knowledge make me more money or healthier or happier or more psychic?
I hate to use boring examples, but actually, I've been
Please
teaching.
do.
I've been teaching this for a while, and you know what? I'm doing okay. I invented about a dozen, maybe 20 different cool gadgets because I learned what charge collapse is, like how to tune brain waves, how to tune water, how to tune plasma, how to tune sound, bliss binaural. So it's, yeah, you absolutely. This is probably the most commercially valuable understanding on the planet, in my humble opinion, including how carbon nanofullerenes make gravity and 0-point energy. It's the same physics, man. Absolutely cool.
Okay.
And fun. Nothing
there
else is more fun. Nothing else is more fun. I promise you.
So understanding these physics and how charge collapse applies is manipulating literally everything as well. And there's a lot of opportunity here.
And the most fun thing there is to do. Absolutely. That's my humble opinion.
Okay. And so what does it mean to the world now? Like, where is the world now as opposed to where it should be with this knowledge?
Oh, so we just had this expert named Thoth who adopted my friend Dahlia, and he assured us that 2/3 of this planet is already soulless and going fast. Oh yeah.
So this is charge that's missing.
Well, this is because so many people have lost touch with what now we know we can teach electrical engineers what a soul is. I won't mention websites here, physicsofsoul.com. However,
that's okay.
But the thing is, so the planet is in huge, huge trouble. Absolutely. Children are becoming soulless by the millions rapidly until we teach our scientists and our governments what the hell a soul is. Until then, we're in huge trouble. Absolutely. No way through death for them, man. No way through death. So it means
this is something that they.
Yeah.
So somebody like that, when they die, do not charge collapse by the golden mean, right, and lose their coherence.
We have been teaching the physics for 20 years. The physics of successful death, goldenmean.info/immortality, is simple. It's a series of 4 visions, Heinrich-Kluffe form constants. You see, your DNA is imploding. To implode you into the longitudinal array, the only definition of ancestor memory, collective unconscious, and communion of saints. And not successful death is you didn't do the compression right. Like if you tried to take anger through the wormhole, hell no, ain't going.
So this is a big deal for the world in general, just on a spiritual level.
Yeah,
that's what this means for the world right now. Not besides understanding gravity physics and how we could defeat gravity, create things like anti-gravity. And like you said, 0-point energy, free energy, and the ability to move heavy things freely.
But we think just to say
the spiritual.
On the spiritual level, we believe strongly we have for the first time defined what's meant by heaven and the plains of Sharon and Champs-Élysées. We know exactly what that is. Electrical engineers should be teaching it. It's a charge distribution efficiency that comes from fractality, like Tony's famous obelisk in a dodeca array of longitudinal. That's an introduction to the physics of heaven. And if you ain't got that distribution working, that was the only name. Ancestor memory was the only name for God for the Aboriginals, and they were right.
Very interesting. So the spiritual impact of this knowledge is far more direct, far more necessary than any of the other knowledge, because we're talking about our own awareness or our own consciousness being erased, essentially.
We need the hygiene.
Okay. Okay. Here's a great question. How did you figure all this out?
Well, Vincent said I was a reincarnation of John Dee. There's a fragment of soul, and I have a little fragment of memory of Tutankhamun. But when I was young, I was passionate to understand the principle behind how everything worked. I always bought books on how everything worked. And finally, electrical engineering school and a few other details. I ended up at the Gurdjieff School in West Virginia doing sacred gymnastic and started having bliss and Kundalini experiences, leading to 30 years of intense Kundalini experiences, which is sitting in the middle of a lightning bolt for non-destructive compression, literally, which means that you begin to talk fast. I mean, your mentation speeds up. And so if you, in that sense, you realize that the only thought that can get immortal is the one that's perfectly shareable, literally pure principle. And if every single thought you have is pure principle, your hair is standing up all the time, eureka, and you never die. So I started studying the physics of pure principle, physics of consciousness. I was doing electrical engineering, psychophysiology in graduate school and IBM systems analysis. And I taught physics.
So electrical engineering and your spiritual awakening led you with your knowledge of electrical engineering to conclude how this works, and then the math all lined up after the fact. Is that right?
Yes. That actually, it was my spiritual interest that led me to my electrical study of psychophysiology, which led me to my electrical understanding of bliss experience, because I had 30 years of bliss experience.
So what would you recommend I do with this knowledge?
Well, this applies to almost every field of knowledge. As we said, electrical engineering of zero-point energy, of gravity, of how to design a city, how to design a refrigerator to keep food fresh. I mean, there's a billion examples, but, for each of us have our own specialty and interest. Tony is teaching remote viewing, beautiful, and learning how to teach remote viewing, understanding how the longitudinal node is the leverage point, literally the only place telepathy is actually possible by measurement. So there are a billion applications for this, but basically it's about charge distribution efficiency, which defines urban design. History of computing is only a story of the history of compression. History of consciousness is only a story of the history of compression. How you got through death. Alchemy is only about history of compression. Fusion is only about history of compression. So once you understand non-destructive compression, you got an answer to every problem physics ever had.
So there's a lot you can do with this.
Alchemy is just the beginning, man. It's all fun.
And then what are your next steps? What are the next steps for this? So how do we give this to people?
Well, I've taken little pieces of this and had a lot of fun. I built the imploder.com, water vortex, brainwave vortex, plasma vortex, piezo vortex. We've got 20 different technologies and we're having some fun. My personal passion has been currently to prove that as I can teach by measurement in biofeedback, flameandmind.com, kids to make alpha. That's a turning point. When you start making alpha, you don't need a teacher anymore. It's very cool. So if you can teach kids to start making alpha, which is the beginning of remote viewing and seeing without their eyes and lucid dreaming, and the beginning of bliss. So the turning point is when the child learns to make their own alpha, which is basically Schumann, and start that implosion. Now, if you can reliably teach billion young people how to make their own alpha, they're going to have a soul. So I am determined to improve our feedback tools, Flame and Mind, Brainwave, so that when kids make the first little bit of alpha, they get the right audio feedback cue and they learn inside, and then they implode, they embed, and they start to have bliss, and they don't need a teacher. So that's one of the many things we're working on, and zero-point energy. And
don't need a teacher. So
absolutely. Wow. When you have access to your own bliss, you don't need a teacher, really. No, intense bliss is the teacher. Nothing else really matters.
Okay, Dan, I think that'll get us for today. So thanks for that. I'm going to keep recording. I'm going to do this so I know where I'm at. Boom. And that put us on gallery view. So I know there was one other question. Oh, so what I've found is there is an implosion in the heart.
Exactly.
So when we remote view, when we're accessing the data, the heart is a stronger signal than the brain.
It's about the heart's in millivolts, the brain's in microvolts. That's a clue. Oh yeah.
Wow.
But the spectral range, however, most of the heart information in the power spectrum EKG is in the 1 to 30 hertz max is your heart's power spectrum. Brain goes from, like 4 or 3 up to 40 to 80 hertz, actually. The interesting thing is your heart harmonics log function be octave cascades only. Your brain harmonics will start with octave cascades and move to golden ratio cascades. And when you get both, like Jean-Charles Moyen, that's just the moment before he teleported with witnesses. That's because that's imploding into the array. So it's very interesting, that difference.
Do you have a longer cascade sequence? The one I'm looking at is on your from your website. Do you have a longer printout of that, or is that, should I grab a calculator and get after that?
Well, I can
I want to see some of the I want to see some of the other numbers that are higher and lower than this.
Yes,
That one.
you know, if I do a frame grab off the Flame and Sound app, you'd have everything. But
Oh.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, some of this, I'm not trying to plagiarize. I'm just trying to run with it. I think this is understanding this is once I got my head around it and the nodes, and then to see how it worked, I understood quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like I still have questions, right? But once I got my head around that and see how it's easy, so how it applies to, you see how out of whack everything is.
yeah, it's not tuned. And the Schumann is so
Nature is
explicit.
tuned.
The Schumann is
We're
so
not.
explicitly tuned to Planck, and we call it Planck fire, Planck times phi, Planck fire. And there's 200, at least now we have profound physical variables predicted by Planck times golden ratio. It just starts with hydrogen radii. Almost everything negentropic in the universe obeys that, or it ain't negentropic.
When I look around to what, like the grids that we live on, our houses, our buildings, they're all built wrong. It's
Exactly.
all wrong.
Yeah,
It's all
it's the
completely
definition of
wrong.
sacred space. Sacred space means where charge collapses. Hello. Yeah.
Oh, I'm still recording. Thank God. Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad I got that. So
Okay.
Dan, I'm gonna wrap for today, brother.
Okay, good.
This gives me a lot to work on.
I'll send you that chart.
Awesome. I would love to have it for reference. So what's going to happen is Adrian and I are going to make a video talking about this video, and then we'll overlay, and then we'll make another video that starts to demonstrate. We'll make a demonstrator. And then I've got your old videos that we've done and the NOTA videos and whatever we need to tailor after that. So over the next couple of weeks, but this one, Adrian and I are going to talk about this video, and that's going to generate shorts, and I'll send them to you as I send them.
We're going to have great fun, Tony. This is
fun.
shareable, Dave. We are shareable. Thank you, Tony.